Okay.
Okay, so first to say welcome, and we are very thank you for your time. I'm Miri Ifra. This is Ella Gabay.
Yes.
It's the first time, like she said, we are interviewing in English. So
Yes.
we are very exciting. I'm excited to speak with you, and looking forward to seeing you in Israel and in London. We are going to
Yeah.
be in London.
Oh, you're going to go to London. Great.
Yes.
Good.
And
Good.
we want to share with you some details who we are.
Okay.
Okay, so we are the co-founders of the NLP Creative School. We train people how to use creative resource in NLP. We are the producers of the NLP conference in Israel and the facilitators of the Leadership Summit in NLP in Israel the first time. In the first time. And our new method will be presented in the NLP International Conference in London.
In London. Okay, great.
So,
congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So Robert Dilts is one of the founders of the NLP and one of the worldwide leaders of NLP. He is the writer of many books, articles, and techniques. In May, Robert Dilts will come and do a 3-day workshop in Israel. I remember you from your visit in Israel, last visit.
Yes.
A personal story that you told at the end of the workshop, that many times we do not realize or pay attention to the fact that today we are living the dreams of yesterday. Do you remember this story?
I do remember this.
So many people would like to learn from you, to model you, and to make their dreams come true. So we would like to ask you a few questions and learn from you about the strategy of genius.
Okay.
And we want to do it by using a model that you brought to the NLP, the logical levels.
Okay.
So just to remind everyone, there are 3 levels, six levels, spirituality and purpose, identity, belief and values, capabilities and skills, behavior, and environment.
Okay, so at the spiritual level, we want to ask you, what was your vision when you started in the field of NLP?
Well, for me, a vision is always a vision of a better world. I always like to say my vision, my purpose is about, create a world to which people want to belong and in which they can thrive, in which they can grow and develop. And I think this has always been kind of my sense of a vision, that there is, and this world to which people want to belong would have certain qualities like, harmony and I always like to say the three driving passions that I have for my purpose, related to my purpose, are connection of people, connection of ideas, connecting things, creating, so generating, why creativity and genius is important to me, and then contribution, so to serve others, to serve the world. So I think my vision, as I said, is always about, okay, what would be a world to which people want to belong? And then if I focus that on, say, my family, it's a family to which people would want to belong and they can thrive. If I focus it to my NLP University in California, it's okay, that becomes a world. If I focus it on, on the bigger world, well, what world would people want to belong to? And then I think you find these it's a world that would have very, deep and fundamental values. So So like I say, create a world to which people want to belong, and then this idea of connection, creativity, contribution.
Okay. Okay, at the identity level,
Yes.
which characteristics of your identity were involved in your success?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. I think, you know, on an identity level, which means, okay, if I look back on how I've always been, even from the time I was younger, I think part of it is always about looking into something for what is best, you know, what is good. I remember my father telling me that even when I was little, if we would be walking down the street, I would see the stone that had something special about it, or find the coin on the, you know, I mean, there's kind of like an attention to where is there something interesting, something beautiful, something valuable. So I think part of it is there's just a kind of a natural characteristic for looking for what is positive, what is unique, what is useful, valuable. So I think probably that's been something that I've done all my life. I think another probably identity characteristic that I have is a kind of a sense of wanting some kind of connection, rapport, meaning I know that if I even look back to the beginning of my life, the home videos my parents had when I was just little, I could be looking at my older brother and then suddenly mirroring what he's doing. So it's a kind of a natural process of modeling, of connecting. And I remember when NLP first started and Bandler and Grinder just had the meta model, which was only this verbal interaction. Many people that use the meta model would have problems because they were alienating their friends and, you know, just asking all these questions. But I remember John Grinder said he noticed I had I would naturally mirror people, you know, naturally get rapport. But I think a lot of that comes from, on an identity level, just an innate curiosity about people and the world, right? So wanting to know more, wanting to discover more about people in the world. And so I think from a modeling perspective, I was kind of a born modeler, you know, in a way, just because of this kind of curiosity, wanting to understand things. And so I think that's probably, you know, a couple of them. And then I think just another kind of an identity characteristic is not, what do I say? I'm not very driven or motivated by fear. Of course, I have fear like everybody else if I'm in a dangerous situation, but I don't guide my life that way. So I think I might take risks where other people don't take a risk, because I'm not so worried about it. I'm not so worried that it might not work, or I might fail, or people might not like me or something. I just think I have and maybe that's because of a connection to the vision, because I'm not so worried about myself. I'm more focused on the vision and the contribution than on me. So I think those would be my answers.
Thank you. We want to ask you about the beliefs and the values level.
Yes.
What are your values and motivate you your success, and what's the beliefs that support your success?
Well, I think, you know, one of the, why did I get into NLP? One of the big values of NLP is usefulness. You know, Bandler and Grinder always said, okay, we don't know if this is true, but it's useful. Right? You can use it. So I think that's always been a value for me, that and I think it's important also for somebody who's a modeler. You don't just model to understand or to think it's great. You model because you want to use it for something and you want to make it useful for others. So I think that is certainly one value that I've always had, you know. I think another value is I value, I don't know how to say it, sort of innovation, meaning that I've always considered myself, this is maybe also a little bit of connects to an identity characteristic, but ever since I was a child, I always identified with pioneers, you know, first pioneers of the actual, you know, people that go to new environments and explore, but then pioneers who would go to new areas of, you know, science or new ideas or new things. So I think I have a value of innovating things. For instance, I know, so just yesterday I was in Milan and I was at a seminar where there was 300 people and people kept bringing me books to sign. And I realized I can't just write the same thing in everybody's book. See, I have to write something. Part of it is I can't just do the same thing. Even if I'm teaching the same class, I never teach it the same way. So I think this idea of kind of constantly innovating. And I think the other value there is, that it relates to what I also said about my vision, is something about connection. So connecting to people. When I know when I sometimes in doing this signing, or people want to take, 100 people want to take photographs. My wife can become, if people want to take photographs, she can become very bored, or or like, okay, enough. But for me, if I connect to the person and to their enthusiasm, then I don't feel bored, So there's something about connecting to people in a authentic place. Mm-hmm. And actually, I think that would be another really important value for me in my success is a kind of authenticity or integrity. Mm-hmm. If I think about what, when I hear people talking about me and that I feel happy about, somebody says, "Oh, I really love your energy. Oh, I love your humility. Oh, I love, da, 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 da." And I think, yeah, great. Because that's how I want to be, so my values are, authenticity, usefulness, connecting to people, making a positive difference. And then I think my belief, I have some of the beliefs that are certainly beliefs of my success. If we say, well, what is my success? Well, you can measure that, whatever success I have, in terms of, okay, well, I certainly go around the world teaching NLP. You could say that's successful. I've produced a lot of things, like the books and organizations, the NLPU, this IAGC that I'm doing with Steve Gilligan, this health certification process. I mean, I've created a lot of things and I make my living doing it. I think the belief is that if I am truly authentically living my mission, mm-hmm. the universe will support me. God will support me. If it's a little bit like, I don't want to sound particularly religious here, but if I follow God's will, God will,
It's our beliefs too.
will support me, will, make sure I have what I need. And so I think that is, a belief that I have. And another belief, I think it's just that, how would I say, that this I guess it has to do with, if I use my energy and my effort just, how do I, here's another way to say it. In a certain way, things are not so complicated, meaning that if I do the right things, now that could be, whether that's about writing a book or whether that's about, making enough money to support myself. If I just do the right things, I don't have to it doesn't really have to take a lot of time, so that I can keep my focus on my vision and my mission. And as long as I pay attention to some details, that's enough. I don't have to put a lot of time into trying to do things like, okay, how am I gonna make money? I don't have to think about that, because I know if I just do a few things and of course I can model what works. That's part of what success factor modeling is about. It's part of what strategies of genius is about. Mm-hmm. That it's usually not something magical, it's something simple. If I think about Milton Erickson, all of the things that he did were in a certain way obvious, so right. if you know how to do those things, life works, mm-hmm. and I think that's part of a belief that has driven me in my modeling, and that's why I share what I share with the success factor modeling, with the strategies of genius, with the NLP tools, is that, okay, if you have the right tool and you know how to use it, it's going to work, basically, of course, then there could be other problems or issues, but fundamentally, how do I say, God designed life to work, so if I just can, I think it was one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein was when they asked him, about why he studied physics. He said, well, I really don't care about how far away that planet is or about what's, frequency this particular color of light is. He said, basically, I want to know God's thoughts. The rest are details.
Oh, nice.
And I think this idea of, okay, God's thoughts are in how things work. And that's why, that's the interesting thing that I always like to say that NLP was the study of what works. So, mm-hmm. But then you could even go farther to say what works is probably, a result of God's thoughts, if you will, of some kind of fundamental, mm-hmm. Fundamental pattern, order, rule, the idea of the difference that makes the difference. So I guess the belief, that's a lot of words, but the belief is just that things at their basis, things are often usually pretty simple, and if you know that pattern, if you know the tool or the way to do it, then it's easy and everybody can do it. That's why, in the work I do in schools, if you know how to spell, anybody can spell, right? If you have the right method, the right tool, then you can do it. And the same with, if you have an allergy or if you have some other kind of illness, that, okay, if you know the way to approach it, things will work. So I guess that would be...
Keep it simple.
Yeah, basically. As Einstein said, he said, you have to make everything as simple as possible, but not too simple. And I think that's the other side. It's not to be overly simple, right? You also have to, you have to say, okay, it's not just so, it's not black and white. Let's put it that way. It's simple, but it is also, it's important to also respect that we are in, how do I say, we are, there is some kind of, there is complexity, but the complexity is not overwhelming, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the capabilities,
yes,
skills level,
yes,
capabilities support your success.
Mm. Well, I think, like I already said, some capabilities come naturally from your identity and from, your values, obviously. So I've always had a capability of like I was saying, sort of being able to mirror, to get rapport. I think, this capability to, and that's why if I start to think, well, what are the ones that I have really focused on and really tried to refine, that are part of that success. And I think one is that ability to really look for the difference that makes the difference, right? How do you find something fundamental? How do you get to first principles, let's say? And, my father was a patent lawyer, was a patent attorney, and his job was to find, well, if somebody makes an invention, what is the invention? What is something that's everybody else has already done or everybody else already knows, and what's the part that's really the new part, the invention. Mm-hmm. And so I think I grew up, around this kind of mindset of looking for, where is the real contribution of something? Where is the real value? So I do think that that's been a capability that I have, is that when I look at something, I'm always trying to find, I can read, let's put it this way, I could read the same quote that other people could read, and I would be able to see, this is what's important. Here's the key idea. So I think that's a skill that has helped me in my success. I think another skill that I probably has helped me in my success is just basically a kind of discipline. People they're always saying to me, wow, how do you find the time to write those books? And I say, well, you don't find it. I would never find it. You have to make it, right? You make the time. You don't find the time, because otherwise you'd be, waiting forever. So there's a certain kind of a discipline that I don't mind, and I know how to, stay focused on something, so to not be too distracted, maybe it's also to follow through, to make sure that I finish something. So I think that's probably a capability. And then I think there's other capabilities, like just simply like, obviously in my business, to succeed in what I do, you have to be able to communicate, and you have to be able to communicate in multiple ways. So there's, I do work on my own presentation skills. I'm always interested in modeling other people that I think are good public speakers or doing a good presentation, but not so much from the perspective of becoming, entertaining people even, or becoming famous, but from the perspective of really communicating something clearly and effectively. And I think that's also part of my skill is, okay, it's communication for a purpose. There's some people are, they're extroverts, and so they're communicate, but they're not necessarily trying to get across a message. So I think this ability to really to skillfully communicate something that might, a lot of times, people will say you can take a complex idea and make it structured and simple. And so I think you could say that's another form of chunking down in NLP. So I think I have an ability to chunk down and chunk up, sort of like, okay, I can go to the different pieces. So I would say those are probably the main skills.
Okay, so now you know what I'm going to ask you.
Yes.
And it's about the behavior level. And I want to ask you, what are the I want to ask you something else.
Yeah.
We have some question, and what is the important activities that you made, and it's about your the behavior level, okay?
Right.
Or which specific behavior promotes your success?
Well, I think that if again, sometimes if you take, some of the answers hopefully start to become, they're aligned with the other levels, so they become obvious. But, I think they're, when I say, okay, if you do the right things, then, things work. So I think there's actually doing things like writing books, I think has been very helpful. I mean, and I remember way when I started, before I had written even any books, somebody was saying, oh, if you just get published, being published is a way, then it goes out into this world where people know about you that you've never met, or, so having forms of communication where, so I wrote articles, I wrote books, I did certain things, like if we say, what actions produce success, I think you have, it's even, in a way, it's what my success factor modeling circle of success is about, right? You have it defines, there are certain actions you have to take with respect to your customer. So some of those involve communicating to them, right? So I would, I have, like, for example, even on my website, there's things that I'm giving away for free because it's not really advertising, but it's a way of people getting to know, not just about me, but about the ideas. I think the other thing that is really important, and we talk about this in the circle of success, is relationship building, right? So making sure that I seek and that I care for certain relationships and a certain quality relationship with key people. So one action is having modalities of communication that are, what you would call it, sort of mass communication, do things that, it's a kind of what I call a high leverage behavior. Yes, it might take me a while to write an article, but once it's written, it goes and goes and goes and goes, which is very different than if you spend a lot of time doing something and when you're done, it's over and it's gone. So I've always tried to put my effort into something that will last beyond when it's finished, if that makes sense. I mean, even a seminar, when a seminar is finished, it's finished. But if somebody videoed the seminar, if you record the seminar and you turn it into a book, then it's not just one thing, it becomes many things. And also, I also did I specifically try to work on things that I know will have a value in other places. What I mean by that is that as Gregory Bateson, who was one of my major mentors along with Erickson, he said, everything is a metaphor for everything else. So what I do in business, I can take and I can use in, personal development. What I do in health, I can take and use somewhere else. So I think my actions have always been focused on these things that can be leveraged beyond just the action itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, of course.
So like I could say writing books is a good example, and I think books, I sometimes think, books versus videos and other things. Somehow I think books are still one of the most powerful. I mean, the reason I've written so many is that I think that they create a very powerful kind of a foundation, and they can be used in many, many, many ways. Even more than a video. I mean, videos are maybe more popular in some ways, but there's something about the leveraging ability of a book. Once it's there, something is quite concrete. And then And then a lot of the other actions that I take, so speaking on an action level, and this relates to, remember I talked about relationships, is to establish relationships that will be generative. What I mean by that is some relationships are nice. It's okay that somebody's a friend and all. But a generative relationship is through that relationship, you're creating something more than you could create by yourself. So if I take NLP University, I created with Judith Delosier, and with and this IAGC I created with Steve Gilligan. And so I'm often doing things with other people. Actually, for many years, I worked with Mia Siegel, who was Israeli, and worked with, she was Moshe Feldenkrais's main student. And we would bring together NLP and the Feldenkrais body work. And so for me, those actions, not only do they produce something in the world, but I grow, I develop through them. So that's what I would call a generative relationship. So I think the way I would describe the actions are high leverage action, right? Something that produces something that goes beyond the action. And number two, really working to find and promote generative relationships.
Thank you. So the environment level, in which ways did and does the environment influence your success?
Well, I mean, the environment is, of course, that's where I have to say, I was probably, that's where all the luck comes in, is in the environment. Because, like I said, my father was a patent lawyer. We came to the Silicon Valley because that's where all the innovation was. And so that's where I ended up at UC Santa Cruz with Padler and Grinder, and, then met to that Ericsson and these other people. I mean, your environment, on the one hand, it shapes you. So I grew up in the, the 1960s in San Francisco, and in the Silicon Valley. And so I grew up around, innovation, around these beliefs that, you can do anything. You can change the world, you can be yourself, and you can, have your own ideas. I mean, so I didn't grow up in a place that was, at war. I didn't grow up in a place where there was a rigid culture. I grew up where this sort of environment is set up to support success, and to support innovation, and to support people to be different. And then I was lucky to have, through that, connections with people, who supported me, like Bandler, Grinder, Ericsson, Bateson. My first corporate client was Apple in 1980. Well, in 1980, we didn't know Apple would become the biggest technology company in the world. It was just, these crazy guys were trying to get personal computers out. So I also, there's part of it is being in the right place at the right time. And that's difficult to model exactly. But I do think that obviously I wasn't the only one there, and not everybody who went to my schools. And I even would say that probably not all the people that went to UC Santa Cruz, not all the people that grew up in the Silicon Valley would be successful, So there is, so it's part of it is you do have a lucky environment, but then you've got to take advantage of it, or, you've got to recognize it. I think I remember from the time I was very young, probably, I don't know, could have been 7 or 8 years old, riding my bicycle. And I realized I had this sense of how fortunate I was, that I was middle class in this, in this area of the world. I'd never been anywhere. An 8-year-old doesn't have a really great understanding of the world, but I knew I was lucky. And that gave two things. One was the realization that I could do, I have a lot of opportunities. And the other realization was a responsibility to give back, that, okay, when you're this lucky, you have a responsibility to do things for others because of, you've received so much. So it's kind of this, what I often like to say even about success is that created both a feeling of gratitude, but also generosity to say, well, I have been given, and I didn't even know it when I was 8, I didn't know that there would be NLP or anything, but it was kind of like this feeling, okay, there's something, I have so much possibility that there is something it wasn't so much that it was my destiny, but it was, well, there's going to be big opportunities. So I think clearly my environment made huge influence on me. And I think, again, California is different than the rest of the United States, but, so I'm American, I'm Californian. Not only that, I was in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, the Silicon Valley, where most of the world would want to, that's where they would want to go and grow up. So that was very, and I grew up in a time, obviously the time I grew up of this revolution of the 60s, of then the technology revolution of the 70s and 80s, and, I basically I lived in an environment where success and growth were the norm, that was the baseline. So that kind of became my, again, hopefully part of my own character, but also part of what I would want to communicate and bring to the world, that's how, when I say a world to which people would want to belong, it would be that kind of world. So I guess
it's connected to your mission, to your vision.
Yes, absolutely. It all connects, I'm lucky.
Yes. Okay, so before we're going to end this interview, I want to ask you some question for our community in Israel.
Sure.
And we want to, in few words, what you are recommended to the people are starting out in the NLP field.
Well, if you take with this whole interview that we were just saying, is that I think for people who are starting out in the NLP field, rather than just start only by focusing on, well, what are the skills? You start by focusing on, well, what is the mission that I have that this will serve? Because you'll get a lot more out of it. If I just go to learn something, then I'm learning it. But if I realize I have this mission, then the skills will have, a meaning to me, and I can use them more immediately. And the good news is that I think NLP skills can serve every mission in the planet, so regardless of what you do, whether it's medical or whether it's in education or whether it's military, whether it's, NLP skills are their foundation. So it's not a question of will they be useful. I think you can't live with, even if you've never learned NLP, you still use NLP without knowing it, because it's like I say, it's what works. So more the question is, what's my motivation? And if I know what is my passion and my motivation, then I will learn the skills a lot faster and a lot better.
Thank you. We are in another environment here in Israel.
Yes.
And next week, the Israeli Leadership Summit will meet for the first time. This is a continuation of the summit in Spain that you were in. And what do you recommend to the NLP community in Israel to promote the field here, to promote our situation here in the Middle East?
Well, so by the way, a couple of things. First is, I said I grew up in the Silicon Valley, and having been to Israel several times and having many friends also from Israel, what I believe is that Israel is one of the most innovative places, outside of Silicon Valley. So there is something special, right? I think that there's I think in terms of some of these skills that I talked about that were part of my success, I learned them being in the Silicon Valley, which is a different environment. But I think people in Israel also have a sense, there's a sense of discipline. There's a sense of looking for the things that are useful, what's works. There's that sense of innovation, of, okay, we have to do something different, something new. So I think that's part of the reason that even though it's a different environment, you don't have the same, there's a lot more challenges in Israel than in Silicon Valley. But I think there is an attitude and a mindset of taking what's there and making the best of it. That's what is this, I think that's where, how do I say, positive change always comes from. Steve Jobs said this very interesting thing where he said, so when you grow up, you tend to be told that the world is the way that it is, and your life is going to be to live in that world. And he said, try to make some money, have some fun, have a good family life, but don't shake things up too much. And he said, yeah, but he said, that's a relatively limited life. And he said, your life can be much broader. He said, if you realize one simple fact. And he said that everything that we call the world and everything that we call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you, and he said, and you can make a difference, right? You can change it. He said, you can push here and something will come out somewhere else, that meaning that I think it's this fundamental idea that you make a difference, right? You are part of this web of the world and of reality. And it doesn't matter where you are. In some ways, it doesn't matter who you are in the fundamental sense. If you, kind of like what I was saying, if you know how to make the difference, if you know where to push, something will shift. And so then he said, once you realize this, you will want to change things and make them better. Once you realize that you can change things, of course, you will want to make them better. And he said, and then your life will never be the same. So I think to realize that, first of all, I think, to me, ever since I've been growing up, certainly in my world, Israel has always been sort of it's a place in the world and in history that has been a core place for change, not just change, but for both, how do I say, there's both legacy and change for the future. They both come together, right? It's not just history, it's also making a difference, leading the world somewhere. So I think recognizing that place, and that, and what again, my advice to the Leadership Summit is in Israel is that, you have in some ways a privileged place in the world. It's not an easy one, right? It's not, but it's an important one. And what you do there in that Leadership Summit is not just something that, remember, like I said, it's not, so it doesn't happen in the Leadership Summit and then when the meeting is over, it's over. you could do things together there that what I was calling leverage, that would go far beyond that, and maybe to find those things. I actually was gonna look at one thing that I would share that came from the leadership summit in Alicante that I was just at, and we were, first of all, one of the discussions was about what were the important things about NLP, and what was the kind of a vision for NLP. And I'm just looking at my notes to see what, one of the things that everybody was saying, we said, why is NLP, what do we appreciate about NLP? So we're all NLP trainers, have been trainers. To be in the leadership summit, you have to have basically devoted a lot of your energy and your life to NLP. And hold on, if I can just find so we came up with, what were the 4 things that we thought were most key, about NLP. And the first one was that, again, that it was a technology that you could make things that other people could use, So the second was that it was about empowerment, that we said a great thing about NLP is that its whole purpose is, by giving you the tool, I'm no longer in charge, or I'm no longer the one, you become as empowered as I am, right? So it's about empowering others. The third was, we said the other amazing thing about NLP, kind of we were talking about, is that it's interdisciplinary. That means you can, I don't know any other field in the world where it's used in business, it's used in sales, it's used in education, it's used to treat traumas, it's used to, people use NLP for every single thing, right? This is astonishing. There's certainly no other psychological, process that is used that widely. You can't use transactional analysis for sales very well, or for other, I don't know, or to help people spell. But NLP you can use for anything. And I think, and that's a strength, and it's also been kind of a weakness, because there's so many things that they're not all well researched. Then people make claims that create problems. But I think that is one of its values. And then finally, this whole notion of NLP being self-evolutionary. That is, it's about creating a new consciousness through an attitude of curiosity and wonderment. So I say that because, for me, what I would want for the NLP summit in Israel is to remember and to be aware, to know. It's a little bit like, I was saying that when I was 8 years old and having this realization about, wow, who I am and what I could do, because I didn't know what it was yet, but realize the kind of place that NLP can have in the world, the kind of place that Israel has in the world and can have in the world, and then, embrace it, take advantage of it, find what can I do, what is the positive differences that we can do. And that would be my advice.
Okay, thank you. So please tell us about your seminar that you facilitate in Israel from May 8th to the 10th this year.
Well, that seminar is basically, we've talked a lot about it in many ways already. It's about this idea that I guess this is another belief. I didn't say this, but it's another belief that is part of NLP, but it's also been part of me. It's this idea that we can learn from, everybody, so that to me, that it's this kind of a thing that says that a genius is no different than us, except that they have this idea is that they have a know-how, they have a strategy, that they know how to look at something in a certain way. And if you learn to look at it the same way, you would be a genius, have the same kind of result. It doesn't mean that if I study the Mozart strategy that I write music like Mozart, but it means I can be as creative. I can, or the same with Einstein, or the same with Leonardo da Vinci, or with others. So the whole idea is that we can learn from other people simple things that can make a big difference in whatever we do, right? So it doesn't have to be the same thing that they did. That's the great thing about NLP. It's not about the content. It's about the process. So again, this program it's going to be essentially about the process of these geniuses on these different levels. It's not always only on the capability level. It's also on the belief level. It's also on behavior level, some of these things. So the whole idea there is that through that program, people become more empowered, more creative, more and how do I say, more able to not only have charge of their own life and experience, but help others, right? To support others in a creative way. So, and the geniuses we are looking at are geniuses, like we said, they're interdisciplinary, music, science, psychology, art. So we're going to really be looking at the sort of the genius of the whole person. And the idea, of course, is that people walk away from there not just having knowledge, but some things that they put into practice, they can use in their daily life, they can use with their family, they can use in their business, that will, create these, that will create innovation, empowerment, and contribution. So that's what that seminar is about.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
We would like to personally invite you to our workshop at the NLP International Conference in London.
Which day is it?
On Sunday, May 20th, in 4.5, I think, if you will be there. And
I may still be there, I may not, I'm not sure. I know I will be there Friday and Saturday, but I might have to leave.
We will meet you anyway, and you
thank you. I'm very happy for that, and it's a motivation to stay if I can.
This is about the NLP Creative, the new generation of NLP.
Okay.
And to everyone that's watching us, thank you very much for joining us. And shalom ve'leitraot from Israel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
And au revoir from Paris.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.
See you.